everybody doing today? Great. All right, cool. So I'm Sherry, this is Agrim, and I know you all just had lunch, and so we're gonna try to do something that, gets you excited after, digesting all that food. We're gonna talk a little bit about, what AI coding has been doing in speeding up development processes, how us startups use it in our day-to-day, but we're actually gonna spend most of the time actually building something live because it's always better to show and not tell. So what we're going to talk about today is how we can actually build in this age of AI. Now, who here works for a startup or is a founder? Maybe raise your hand. Dila, yes, I know you are. So many folks probably traditionally have followed the process of, hey, if I'm not technical, I'm going to go and come up with a business plan, and then I need to find a technical co-founder, and then I have to hire engineers, and then raise some money to hire those engineers, and you basically are going to spend quite a bit of money and then hire a bunch of people just to prove out whether or not people even want to use your product. Now, that is one of those things that makes it difficult to get many, many startups off the ground, but the age of AI has really changed things and kind of flipped it, where now, because AI allows anybody who can basically use human language, English, to build, you're getting development cycles shrinking from 6 months, 6 weeks, sometimes even 6 hours, where we're seeing so many teams, could be one person, spending only 1 week to build a single product to prove out whether or not that is something that people really want. Because that is the biggest risk as a product builder, right? If people really want the product that you are essentially building, right? So all this is compressing a lot with a lot of the tools that have been coming out.
Yeah.
And the other thing that has come as a result of this is many times, because if you're a non-technical person, you can prototype things really fast and rapidly with tools like Cursor or V0. You don't actually need to always have a pitch deck when presenting your idea. In fact, you can actually spend just a couple of hours and build something else and pitch it. So just a little bit of a personal story. This is something that we actually did as Peak. So I'm somebody who, while working in tech for more than a decade, I am a non-technical person by training, but I picked up how to actually use AI to code and build my own apps around last year. And earlier this year, we got the first round of funding through a fund called Iterative, and actually the way that we pitched them was through building the prototype itself, which I whipped up in 3 hours, showed it to 20 or so Gen Zs, and seeing if AI helps them manage money in a way that's more fun. And that's actually how we raised $275K, right? So again, being able to capture how people feel about your product using it firsthand is much more visceral than just having a pitch deck. So the show, not tell, is really kind of coming through a lot in today's day and age.
No.
Can you guys hear him?
I'll just talk in this. This also applies if you're technical. So for my company, it's just me and my co-founder, so we don't really have a big team that we are working with. And these approaches have been really sound for us. So firstly, with sprints, we don't really have to spend 1 or 2 weeks thinking about things. Sometimes the sprints can just be a full day of us building out the feature, testing the feature. If it doesn't work, we go do something else. So the time of going from idea to something that's tangible has obviously drastically reduced. But the show don't tell function has been really useful for us when we're talking to customers. So it's easy for me in a previous world to think about it as I have a call with a customer, we talk about something, and then after the call I'm maybe putting together a deck of some kind, or I'm putting together some notes that I want to send for them to review and get back to me. Now what that looks like is I'll probably open up something like V0, and I will just build the prototype while the call is going on. It doesn't need to be obviously a fully functional prototype, but the things that you want the user to see, which is how does information flow in my app, or what does a user journey need to look like when they're using a particular feature or an app, that is something that I can whip up while the call is going on, or use it as an opportunity to co-create with them. This has been really useful because, again, for the user, this is a really abstract concept as to what is he talking about, what are they trying to build for us. But now, because they can see, they can very quickly tell you, okay, I don't like this, I like this, I would like us to upload Excel files here instead of like some other file, or I should be able to visualize the output that is generated instead of just getting a file to download, whatever that might look like. The only way to get that sort of tangible feedback is by showing them something they can yes, no their decision with, as opposed to, look, I'll get back to you with a deck, like, 2 hours from now or whatever.
Actually, just by show of hands, who here has heard of Cursor before? Okay, that's like a third of the room. Who here has heard of V0, Vercel, Lovable, maybe? Okay, great. So some familiarity. Who's tried a tool, like built something, tinkered? All right, cool. So don't worry about all those names and terms, and actually, to be honest, even the specific tool you use is whatever works for you. We'll demo it later on today for you to basically understand how it works kind of end to end. But yeah, so just wanted to get a quick sense of familiarity. So why does all of this matter, right? So as Agrim alluded to, right, it's not just the engineers who are getting that 10x productivity, which they are, to kind of shrink development timelines that literally would have taken maybe 6 months and it's 6 days, but it's actually increased the number of people who can actually be creators in this space as well. So there's this term I like to use. I call it lower the barrier, but raise the bar. Because now you can pick things up if you just have, a particular use case or user you want to solve for, you can build those things out as a non-technical person. That has democratized the ability for people to create if they have the passion and idea. At the same time, because AI has now allowed you to speed up your iteration cycles, the bar for what you can accomplish is also increased. So I'll give an example because we just actually ran the biggest hackathon in Asia in a long time in Singapore just this past weekend, and it was a 24-hour hackathon. The two of us, I think, collectively slept 2 hours during that entire event, but there were 500 people that came, 150 projects submitted, and it was a huge range of people that came. Agrim could talk a little bit more about it, but he's been at hackathons for, I guess, over a decade, and you never kind of saw this room of such diverse backgrounds. 50% of the people who came to build and ship products were first-timers at hackathons. Some of them actually downloaded the tools literally 2 days before the event. The finalists actually included somebody who's a social worker, right? And the youngest person was 13 years old. He came to build with his sister and his dad. And then we actually had people who were also in their 60s who are just learning, right, what all this is about. So it was just this tremendous kind of moment of seeing so many people come together in a way that we really hadn't seen before, that has just been made possible with these tools that allow you to build.
Yeah, and this is kind of a far cry from where things used to be. That as a technical person, this used to be super annoying when you went to a hackathon and got approached by a business person who would tell you, hey, I have this great idea, but I need a technical person to build this. And this kind of did two things. One was that it made you feel like your ideas weren't important enough because the business guy wanted to run his ideas. And the second thing was that the business idea can't execute and it's all talk. But now that has flipped pretty crazily, where a lot of people who came to our event last week felt that they could build. Like, even though they probably had the same background, the same training, social workers, consultants, business analysts, the accessibility that these tools has provided allows them to go past I think I need a technical person to help me build. You can at least start getting the first versions of what you're building out there. That's not to say you might not need a technical person down the road, like especially if you build more complex things, but it's like I would find it hard to believe that you can't build anything given where the tools are at this point. Every model is super powerful. There is a plethora of tools available regardless of where your allegiances lie. If you want to use Lovable just announced yesterday that there's like a Shopify integration as part of their stack. So you could theoretically ship full storefronts with Shopify, with a backend, with authentication and everything, just using that one tool. So all that stands in the way of you building it, and where you are now is whether there's intent on your part to build this, and like, do you have taste to build something that is actually good and polished? Right?
So essentially now, we're in a world where we see just so many creative solutions come together. I'll give an example of some folks that actually came to. We teach a AI coding workshop in Singapore. About 700 people have gone through it so far, and we've seen some really interesting problems solved that I think really only can come when somebody has a specific background and they can finally code. So you get things like a teacher, no technical background, building an adaptive learning system for her students. So basically, as you answer maths questions correctly, incorrectly, then the next question basically is based off of how they've been scoring, right? We've even had really creative things like a poop tracker where somebody is trying to improve their gut health. I had never thought about that idea before, but somebody came, built it, shipped it. Also came to our hackathon and built tarot card, Baozi master thing for job hunting. Like, there are some wild ideas being created. Like, the sky really is the limit when you go from a niche of folks that are technical, that are building all the ideas, to the entire universe of what is possible in this world, when everybody has a chance to be able to build.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it still comes down to your thought process, your taste, and you wanting to do things, right? Like, at this point, the only barrier is the intention from your end to go and build. And the other thing that will create differentiation is what taste and ideas that you bring to the table. So just on the way to the venue, we saw one of our friends replicate what the winners at the hackathon built in under 2 hours. And she said that, it was so easy for us to build what won at a hackathon that was organized by OpenAI. So it's easy enough that you can copy things, but the difference between the winner and my friend was the winner did it independently, whereas my friend copied an existing idea and tried to replicate it, right? So your way to stand out in this space is how much originality, personal taste, flavor, knowledge you can bring to the table as you build it, which is why some level of domain expertise, knowing your spaces really well, knowing your businesses really well, knowing your users really well, is information that I might not have. And that's going to be the difference between you building something and me building something, because you will have some sort of insight that allows you to build a very niche, clean application that works for your users exactly the way you think it should.
We're also in this interesting time where you can kind of fit in a lot of different areas when it comes to this whole vibe coding space. Now, the top right corner, pure vibe coding, that green thing, is probably where you have probably the most negative connotations of vibe coding, which is, all right, I'm just gonna put the prompt in, wing it, don't ever look at the code, have no idea what I'm doing, I'm leaking all sorts of private information, and that's what ends up on Twitter, and a bunch of software engineers say vibe coding doesn't work, it's not gonna take off, right? So that's the kind of place that you don't necessarily wanna be in forever. Of course, when you're starting out, it's true that you're kind of vibing your way through it and kind of learning as you go. But eventually the goal is to fit in on the left-hand side these two different quadrants. Now, one of them is AI team development or team project manager. And this is where I think a lot of people who are like me, who come from a traditionally non-technical background, who are now semi-technical, actually fit in. Where because I am now more technical, I can empower my engineering teams and help us move a lot faster. One of the things that, I don't know how many people in this room are engineers, but if you're a PM, product manager, or your founder comes up to you and gives you an absolutely ridiculous, absurd request that indicates that they haven't really thought through the tech stack, you kind of stare at them and you're like, I don't think it can be done. A lot of that gets circumvented if you are actually technical and can empathize and understand the process that your engineers go through. So you can meet them halfway and actually create much higher fidelity requirement stocks, because you can actually query the code base. I do that regularly all the time, right? If I'm like, I have a chat feature in our app and we're trying to reduce latency by X amount, I can actually go through and hunt what kind of services are creating that latency and come up with actually a semi-decent plan where somebody can look at it, validate, and say, okay, that sounds good, and start working on it. So this is where, again, some of you may sit in if you take upon AI coding, vibe coding, and empowering your teams when you're somebody who's able to prototype fast, plan fast, and just speak the language much more, clearly with folks that build.
Yeah, but there are obviously folks who are technical, so folks like myself, where we're starting to fit in the lower left quadrant, which is AI assistant development. So the thing that runs consistent between the technical and the non-technical people is you need to have a very clear idea of what you want to build. I think most people think this is trivial, but after having taught like 700 plus people, seen another 400 or 500 at the hackathon, you realize that what's in your head and how the AI interprets it are two very different problems. Most people usually don't think through the problem in very clear steps that can be explained to a layperson or someone who's not from their domain. And AI is no different. Like AI is very eager, wants to help you write, wants to help you build. But if you're not able to spec out the specifics of what you're trying to do, that as a user, I want to be able to do this. As a user, if I take this action, I should be able to do certain things. Or I'm building an application to serve a certain feature. This is how that feature needs to play out when a user interacts with it. That level of specificity is still required in the kinds of planning you do. But for me, as a developer, what that means is I can describe a slightly higher level overview, get it to write code, and then I can double check its work and see whether the code was written correctly or not, whether it's using the patterns I like to use, is it using styles that are outdated, is it writing code that is too long, or the files are like 1,000 lines long, and then some of that is just harder to manage. Those are kinds of things that I would want to participate in. But the overall hierarchy, design, and structure of what the code looks like still has to come from me, because I'm the one in charge of what is being done. For her, what she ends up doing now is, if she has the access to the code base from her engineers, she just starts querying the code base as to what is happening at every step. Like explain what happens from step A to step B. What are the services that are getting called? Do we need to call these services? Why was this code written? How much time is this adding to the process? So one of the things she mentioned in passing was Peak had a lot of latency built into the application. And she was trying to figure out, why is there such a lag between the user asking a question and you getting a response? Because that lag wasn't coming from the AI model. It was coming from somewhere else in the process. And by just querying and stepping through the steps that the application was taking, she was able to go to her engineers and be like, what's happening at these two steps? And should this be happening, and should we try to resolve this? This did two things. One is that now she had a shared language to work with technical staff, which was previously unavailable. Second is she can go into the conversations where she brings information to the table, as opposed to, hey guys, nothing works, fix it. And they're like, everything works, it's fixed. And both of you didn't really get your questions answered because both of you didn't really have common ground to work with. But instead, now if Sherry goes, there's latency, this is the step, this is the problem, let's try to fix this. The engineers can give you a very clear answer on, okay, we've either tried to resolve this and these problems happen because of whatever reason, or yes, we had not seen this, let's try to fix this. But at least everyone's operating with the same language and the same page. And that's most important. The things that don't work and will not work regardless of whether you're coding or whether you're using just vanilla GPT is improvisation. That you can't just wing it, because when you're winging it, you're letting the AI tools that you're using assume what's in your head. And oftentimes the result of that is that you're trying to undo the work that AI is doing, as opposed to working incrementally and building on top of what was done. So we've seen countless examples where people give a one-line prompt for, hey, I just want to build this. No background, no specification, no context. The AI's immediate response is, okay, I'm going to go build you this thing. And then you see the people be like, oh, I did not want that, or this is not exactly how I thought about the process. I needed something else. And now you're getting the AI to undo work, and oftentimes it'll undo work by writing more code, and you just find yourself in this doom loop of, I'm now having to wrangle more lines of code that I already don't understand, and I don't know where to really start fixing the mess. So that's why planning and specifications become such a real part of dealing with this. But that said, that's not a unique thing to a developer. Anyone, technical or non-technical, can and should be doing this.
Yep, and in a way, managers have been vibe coding forever. If you think about it, LLMs and coding agents, right, all they are doing is kind of replicating the specific actions that you would have had somebody who's an engineer on your team do, right? You can have agents write tests, right? You can have them create UIs, all of that. So as a manager, right, you're not writing every single line of code, you're creating the plan, or you're having the AI or the human create the plan, you review it, and then at each different step of the way, you're in the loop to like guide or provide your own taste. So many of us, in general, even if you aren't an engineering manager, you've worked with people on your teams, right? You get the best results when working with somebody if you're really clear about your instructions. If you have an over-eager intern that joins on day one and you tell them, hey, can you make a spreadsheet of all the businesses in Indonesia? They have no idea what you're asking for, but they're gonna be like, you know what, I really wanna impress my boss and I'm gonna do all this stuff that 99% of it is useless. That is exactly what working with AI is. Like, we've all done it in our jobs. Just apply that same kind of thinking with an LLM. All right, we're gonna go through like the next couple slides fairly quickly because we wanna get into building instead of just yapping, but we do wanna cover some of the principles of vibe coding that we're gonna emphasize again and again in our demo. That's important. That is something that even engineers are kind of adapting to as this like mindset shift, right? Number one is that being purely technical is not the most important thing now. It is about having the ability to do systems thinking. Now, we engage in systems thinking no matter what kind of job that we're in, right? An architect who wants to build the foundations of this building and decide how different parts fit together before putting the flooring down, that is systems thinking. If you are a doctor and you're trying to ask step-by-step investigative questions to figure out if this person's cough is a cold or something a lot more serious, that is also systems thinking. So being able to frame a problem and understand their relationship to each other, that is what coding basically is. There's a bunch of different services, things that work, flow of information through your app that fit together. Coding is basically bringing that to life now with AI. Next part is about this term called context engineering. Now, who here knows what prompt engineering is? Heard of it? Okay. Has anyone heard of context engineering? One person, maybe three. Okay. So the thinking around using LLMs last year was this thing called prompt engineering, which I think few folks in the room might know of. It's basically the idea that you word things a certain way to the LLM to get the best output, right? So you may have seen online, okay, if you bribe the LLM, hey, I'll give you $100 to do this, the LLM performs better, or you tell the LLM, hey, my grandma's sick and I really need you to finish this, please. You can there's a lot of these little tricks that people talked about, right, around getting output out of LLMs. But that's kind of gone away, and now the prevailing thinking is around this idea of context engineering. Now, we've all provided context to humans. Who here has bought a gift for somebody else before in their life? I think there's probably more than people who are raising their hands, but if you buy a gift for somebody, if you don't know anything about them or aren't able to ask any questions, it's kind of hard to know what to get, right? But if you're able to ask, hey, what are your interests? Maybe how old are you, etc., then you're able to buy a better gift, right? And that's actually the art of context engineering, or providing background to an agent or to an LLM to perform a task the way that you want it to, and produce higher quality output.
Yeah. So part of this is whenever you're using any of these tools, the first prompt that you write becomes really important, because if you don't provide any context to the AI just goes and builds, right? Or it goes and executes, and again, then you're having to fill in context. So one of the two things we usually like to do is either you spend time building your first prompt out really well, or before the AI commits to writing code, as you're planning with AI, get it to ask you questions that can help clarify your thinking. This is again one of those underutilized techniques where just getting the AI to ask you questions and you answering them will add more detail to the context that was previously missing. So taking the example of gift giving, if I'm buying a gift for Dilla and I just go and buy her a gift, this kind of misses the context on who she is, what she likes, does she even like the gift I'm going to buy for her, does she already have one of these? It's missing a lot of information, so the gift doesn't have any intent or value behind what I gave. But if I find out that, okay, she's really a fan of action figures, and she's really a big fan of British comedy or whatever, right? You find something that fits those niches and then design a gift around it that, okay, you want to get, a Richard Ayoade book or something because he's a British comedian that she might like. So you just adding more details by asking those questions or finding that information becomes useful to getting the end result. So what does that look like with AI? Could be things like documentation that you might have. Could even be design guidelines that you have. Could be profile on the users that you might be building for. If you're technical, that might have some technical documentation and guidelines on what the rest of your app stack looks like, what languages are you operating in. Anything that offers more context, even from just file naming conventions or design guidelines to very specific details about who your user is and what's the kind of product you're trying to build, all of that goes into context engineering. And this is a very different game from what prompt engineering was, as Sherry mentioned, where, do this for me and I'll pay you $100, or think step by step, or, pretend that is the month of July, because you're trying to get the AI to think a certain way. Those techniques are not as effective in getting the outputs, also because all of them are missing context and what the actual problem you're trying to solve is.
The other next point is around conversational iteration. It's usually the case that when you're coding with AI that you are not likely to be able to, in one shot, build your entire app, right? Because, again, you might not necessarily know 100% of what you're looking for until you get some output, and the AI is also trying to understand your context and what you're trying to do. But it's a process of talking back and forth with AI. Now, a lot of people think AI coding is just about writing lines of code, but it's actually missing out on 90% of what it is actually capable of doing, where you can use the AI to actually, as a non-technical person, explain concepts and understand what's going on with each kind of feature you're building. You can use AI to plan each step of the way as well, because again, sometimes if you have AI just dive straight into something without thinking through the actual plan and of execution, it might not produce the best results, right? So it is this constant iteration process that you're talking back and forth in a chat, just like you would with a human. And then finally is this point around observability. So there's a lot of these questions around, hey, if you're non-technical, you don't know how to read lines of code, how the hell are you supposed to debug or basically fix your code if you're getting errors, right? Which is, by the way, very, very normal. You can be the best engineer in the world and you'll get a ton of errors. It's just normal. Stuff won't compile. You get all sorts of red stuff, right? So in this day and age, all you have to do is apply a principle called observability, where you observe what is happening. You say, I'm clicking on this form, this button for this form that I'm filling out. It should take me then to a profile completion page. However, it is taking me to a 404 not found page. That's actually exactly what you would do when talking to AI to build an app, right? You don't need to necessarily know what a route is or all these technical terms, but you've in this very way describing what you are doing, what result you're seeing, what result you want to see is actually how you end up debugging and working on your product.
Yeah, so and think of it in normal terms as well. You would never ask someone to fix something by just saying it doesn't work, right? What doesn't work? What did you try that didn't work, right? What should it have looked like versus what it ended up looking like? Those are the parts of debugging and observability that should obviously feel intuitive, right? That, hey, I'm trying to press this button, it should take me to this form, it's not taking me anywhere. That's probably a much better description than the form doesn't work. Because if you're going to use that with an LLM, it's very hard to explain what aspect of the form doesn't work. Does the input not work? Does the submission not work? Does the output not work? What is the broken part, right? So those are the things that you kind of have to elaborate, that when I tried doing X, I should have seen Y, but I see nothing. Or I'm trying to do something else, is doing something else. What's the difference between these two outputs? But if you just say, nothing works, please fix, or help me, or whatever, all of those things will, again, get the AI spiraling with you, so both of you are now getting confused as you go along.
again, just to reference some real-world examples, most of you have probably had to give feedback to a colleague, or if you have children, maybe like give feedback to your children on what they're doing wrong and what they should be doing. This is exactly the same process as talking to the AI, right? If you're like, hey, I want you to be better at communication. If you're telling somebody you work with, you're like, okay, but like, communication under what context? Is it about deliverable timelines? Is it about like why I'm working on something? If you're just like, oh, be better at communication, I mean, you're gonna look at the person and say, like, I don't know what you mean, right? So same thing, observe, explain what the ideal outcome should be. So again, in this day and age, there's really not much that stops anyone in this room from trying this today. We had many people at the hackathon ship stuff in 24 hours, having the same experience everybody has in this room. All you need to do is think clearly, you build quickly, and you iterate constantly. And on that note, we're gonna move into actually building a product together using the same kind of techniques we do in our day-to-day.
Awesome. Yeah, what should we build? I'm gonna make a new project, and then we can determine what are we gonna build during this hackathon.
By the way, AI will take some time to think and code, so we're going to make this session interactive. So while it's building, we'll see if anyone has questions and things they want us to explain a bit more. We, again, want this to be a two-way street if possible.
Right. So before we start building anything, we're gonna plan what we're gonna build, right? There's no point jumping into writing code if we don't know what we're doing and we don't know what to tell the AI to do. So we're using Cursor right now. Again, if you're like a Claude Code, Codex, whatever app you want to use it. We're just using Cursor right now because it works great. So we're going to build an app that we want you guys to have access to right after this session so that everyone can use it and play around with it. So you know that none of this is like smoke and mirrors.
This is live.
We're going to build like a live app in real time, and then you all can use it while you're here for the conference, right? So we're going to build this app called Overheard at TIA, or Tech in Asia. It's like Overheard in LA or any of these like Facebook pages you might have seen, where we want you to go like take photos around the conference, and it'll create nice comic strips where it roasts all the posters or like the stages that you might see. Does that sound okay? Like, Yep? Okay, so let's build something like that. So I'm going to start planning with the AI. Say I want to build an app that is called Overheard at Tech in Asia. This is similar to the Overheard in LA type apps, but here what we want the user to do is upload or snap a photo, and in return get back a 3-panel comic strip that roasts what's in the photo. Since this is a tech conference, the output should reflect that. Now, I'll also want to probably plan how I want this app to look like, or what am I going to use. So I'll say, let's build this with Next.js, but ensure that the app looks good for folks who open this on their phones as well. The last thing I want to do is figure out, well, how are we going to create these comic strips, right? So what I'll say is, to create the images for the comic strip, I want to use Nano Banana. How many of you are familiar with Nano Banana?
How many know what Google is? It's actually Google's image model. If you go to Gemini, you can use it for free.
So you can use it for free, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it in this company called FAL. FAL is great because it serves all these image models, so I'll just log in and set myself up to use it. I'm also going to put like $50 of credits on this, so if you guys want to go and abuse this, burn my $50, have at it, right? So this comes with a lot of models if you want to do like video or images, but what I'll do is I'll use Nano Banana, I guess, and I can pass this as context to the AI to utilize and build with. So let me just pull this up. Nano Banana. Okay, it's doing image editing. I'll do text to image.
Text to image would be us taking in, I guess, writing and then producing an image out of it.
Right. Or we can do image to you know, whatever, right? So we can do either. Maybe I'll just pass image editing. You know why? Why not? I'll take this. I'll pass it in. Nano Banana, where we can take the user image plus our comic book generation prompt to generate the comic. References here. Before we build, clarify whatever you might need with me. I'll also make sure, how many of you have used MCPs before or heard of MCPs? 1, 2, 3?
Like 5. Yeah.
5, okay. So what MCPs allow you to do is add more context and tooling to your AI. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to provide it an MCP called Context 7 that gives access to documentation. Because if AI is going to write code, I need to make sure it writes the most latest version of this code and doesn't reference libraries that are too out there or like outdated, right? So I'm going to say to create the images for the comic, actually, where's the rest of the prompt? Oops. Let me just pull up the rest. Okay, yeah. Use Context 7 MCP for reference to documentation for what we need. So what we're doing now is we're doing pure planning. We are not doing any building yet. And you can see the AI will start asking us some questions, right? So need to clarify a few things. Should the 3-panel comic have speech bubbles with roast text, comic style illustrations, a mix? Maybe we can do speech bubbles, right? So I'll say, let's try the speech bubbles with roast text overlaid. Skip the auth for now. We don't need a login. 3, image storage. Right now we won't store any images. It'll be like, skip the image storage for now, but allow the user to download the images if they want to. 4th is roast generation. Pre-written or use an LLM. We can say use an LLM to generate the custom roasts that Nano Banana can use. Maybe use OpenAI's GPT-5 for this. And then 5th is comic generation, image to image. T separate. I'll say generate 1 wide 3-panel layout. Okay. So all this is allowing us to do is add much more context to what the AI will do, right? Like if I had not specified any of these things, it'll start assuming, oh, maybe he wants a login. Maybe he wants like just one image edited. Maybe he wants something else. But us providing answers to all of this make sure that the AI knows exactly what it's going to do. Like me specifying what model am I going to build. So let's see what it's spat out for us. It's going to install some stuff. It's going to get some API keys from us, mobile first, some dark themes, vision API and analysis. Okay, 3, 1 per panel, return as JSON. Okay.
Those who are product managers may be familiar with this. This is basically a PRD or product requirement doc. We didn't write any of it. It was just AI with some prompting and answering some questions.
So it wants to use GPT-4o. I will ask it if it can use GPT-5. If not, we'll just roll with this. Can you use GPT-5 instead of GPT-4o? Is it updating the plan? It should be updating it, right? Okay, I mean, we can patch this like going forward. I'm going to get it to build first, and then we'll sort of go from there. So let's get it building.
So now what Cursor is basically doing is it's taking the plan that it has written, or PRD, and it creates a task list here, and it steps through and executes on each of the tasks one by one. So again, this is where we're having a little bit of that conversational iteration, right? Like we have an initial kind of idea, had AI ask some clarifying questions, got a bit more detailed, and then now it's going to go and build, and we're going to see what it comes up with.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there are going to be errors, there are going to be some back and forth. I need to go get some keys. So we'll do some stuff in parallel, but while this is going on, we're also making this more interactive. So if you have questions, things you want to ask, now is a good time while we sit around and wait for AI to do things.
Any questions? Yes? Do we have a mic? Yeah, okay.
I think it's taking too long. I'm gonna.
It's okay. What's your question? I'll answer it here.
Yeah, thank you for the chance. My name is Bara. I want to ask about when do we want to use like full vibe code, or is it like what time should we use like manual coding, like in this middle of the when the code generate?
Yeah.
When the correct time that we need to use manual coding?
Good question. Sherry, you want to answer first, and then we can answer as well?
To be honest, when I first started, I would say it was 100% vibe coding because I didn't know how to edit any lines of code. But as you kind of go along, right, I think there's obviously some things that you'll kind of get more familiarity over and be able to manually edit. So I'll give an example, right? So if you use any services in your app that are, let's say, connected to Maps, Gmail, or a database, you use an API, right? It's basically like a linkage to another service, and there's usually things called route files, right? I didn't know what that was until I started coding. Now, I'm able to actually go in and manually fix some things, because let's say the route file has the wrong model, right? It has GPT-4 when I want GPT-5. Now, yes, you can go and use AI and burn tokens to fix that, but like it's kind of an overkill because I kind of want to use AI for the things that require much more complex execution. So I'll go and manually like change, sometimes even like prompts within that route file that explains to GPT or explains to OpenAI what I want the LLM to do. So I would say that's how I slowly developed where to kind of use that judgment. Maybe Agrim can give his thoughts because he started out his career doing all manual coding, so I wonder, what the
So as someone who was I did computer science at school, so obviously very technical, but you initially start by removing parts of the piece that take the longest time, right? So, you know, like, are you technical by any chance? Yes, right? So, okay. Let's talk about things like setting up a database and setting up authentication. You know that stuff takes time, right? Especially if you're gonna set it up right. Now, if I told you that you could set it up in like under 10 seconds and set it up right, like with all the correct like encryptions and everything, you'd be like, this is impossible. But the fact is you can do it now, right? Like if you use something like, let's say, Superbase, which is a Postgres-based database service, if you pass their MCP to Cursor and ask Cursor to build you a project that sets up DB and authentication out of the box for you, it's one command. And now suddenly my brain space and time is freed up for other things because I don't need to worry about these things that take the longest time. Most of the time, the struggle as a technical person is making sure everything is set up before I do the real things. But now I can focus on doing the real things instead of worrying about all these other things that I need to set up. Like this project setup that's happening in the back, like I'm not doing anything. Like you can see that these files are getting changed in parallel. You can see that these like components are getting created. The API endpoint is getting created while I'm like sitting and yapping to you, right? A lot of this, like for me, the best help has been in setting up the frame for what the application is doing. Then I can dive in deeper and work on the specifics of where I need to step in. So For my work, like I'm working with like an enterprise client. Obviously, there's a lot of custom logic that goes into building some of this. So getting and making sure that that stuff is implemented correctly requires me to dive into the code and make sure things are being handled, the handoffs are correct, the API endpoints are correct, all these things. But the first version of that app was vibe coded. 90% of the app is still vibe coded, but the app is running on enterprise services, so it's hosted on like an Azure VNet. The AI part is being served by Vertex, so the endpoint is private. It's fully encrypted end-to-end, so all the enterprise stuff that you need is still handled. But I'm still not writing like the vast majority of the code that is being written. That I think like is a trade-off that you only start realizing as you use these tools more, that, oh, like I can focus on the things that matter instead of all these other things that would usually take a lot of time. Hopefully that helps, right?
I think there was another hand somewhere there. Okay. Do we have a mic, or I can jump down and do that again? That's fine too. Sorry, I'm a founder, so I'm a little impatient sometimes. Okay, cool, we're good.
Hello. Yeah. What you're demoing is to build something from nothing, yeah,
yes.
From zero. But my question is there any difference between doing these things, like building something from nothing,
yeah,
versus adopting this kind of culture into the existing product, that let's say running product and adding features or fixing bug in the product?
Yeah.
That's the first question. My next question is, was there any challenges to adopt or enforce this culture into your existing team? Because I found that engineers tend to deny to have something, not someone, something that do their jobs, or maybe better in some cases.
Yeah.
So, yeah, how you face that?
I can take a bit of the first question. So all of this works no matter if you are building something from scratch as a new startup, or you're an existing company with thousands of lines of code already written and have tons of engineers. And in fact, one of the biggest proponents of using Cursor, what I'm wearing and what we're demoing, is actually Grab. So they actually worked with us on the first meetup for Grab in Singapore, and they actually demoed how they did this entire migration within their fintech team using something like Cursor. Now, of course, they went through a pretty arduous process of making sure they documented all the stuff that was happening existing, but it was really, really cool to actually see them show the exact files and stuff that were used to kind of execute all of this. So again, the way that you would manage it for a larger existing organization like a Grab versus like a startup with us may be different, but the same logic applies in being able to articulate a proper migration plan, right? What kind of services need to be moved, what needs to be deprecated, etc. All of this still kind of follows suit. So you can, I think the biggest barrier to kind of get on your point is more of a cultural thing, right? And I'm sure there's a few engineers who are in this room. There is, I think, two kind of reactions to this, right? One reaction is, I guess, people like Agrim who are like, look, this is the world that we're moving towards no matter what. I'm gonna find the best way to 10x my own productivity using these tools and allow myself to do higher level thinking like product taste or focusing on user stories and all of that, so that he can think about that and free up his brain space doing the more manual things, right? But
yep.
For a lot of people who obviously have spent their entire careers mastering the syntax and being able to do some of these things manually with code, it's a bit of a cultural change or a shock, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, completely agree with Sherry. Some of my friends who still work at Facebook and all are not using any of these tools because they just find it so foreign as a concept, because it's fundamentally flipped how you think about product. Like when I was studying in school, you start learning the technology first before you start building. Now the approach is you come with what you want to build and then piece together what you might need to get it together. And that approach throws a lot of people off, that this is not how you've done things, so obviously this feels foreign. But the gains are there for you to see. Like if you are able to be a much more effective version of yourself, you can write arguably sometimes better code, or you can build faster, then you start seeing the benefits. So I don't think you can change an organization overnight on these things, but you start introducing them in some places, see some incremental progress, and then give the free reins and be like, hey, just go build. Because the only way to see what benefit this creates is for the engineers to start trying this, even if they're trying it for small things. Like when Cursor first started, like we're not even looking at the code right now, but when Cursor first started, what you could do was, let's say, open a file, and you could make changes within the file. So if I could like Command K, I could select code and make inline changes with AI. So instead of writing the full thing, I could use AI to change pieces of the puzzle. Then came the this thing called tab. What tab allowed you to do was, if it saw some code that could be replicated or auto-completed, you could just press tab and auto-complete your code. So again, you're doing the writing, but things that are repetitive or commonly seen features, you could use tab to complete. So those are probably the easiest places to start. Like our example is like, we didn't look at the code and we were like, let's just go build. So that's probably the most extreme side of it. But the answer is probably somewhere in between where, get them to try to do autocomplete, get them to build pieces of the code that are repeated, where you start using AI, and then you start expanding how you use it. Just to take a pause from the questions, AI does say it's done, where it built a Next.js app with this color scheme, there's a camera upload, there's a roast generation, 3-panel comic strip. It says it's done a lot of things. I highly doubt everything works out of the gate, but we're gonna try and see how that goes. While I'm setting this up, Sherry will take more questions.
By the way, you should always what I call trust but verify with AI. A lot of times they'll be like, I finished, it's great, it's done, but you always got to check the output, because again, there could be things that it hasn't completely done, because one-shotting and getting everything done in one bit is not usually how things go. Question over there.
Hi, my name is Miki. So coming from the Agile background, do you see that these vibe coding will be able to translate user stories into...
Sorry, from what kind of background?
Agile.
Agile.
Yep.
Oh, agile.
Yeah, Agile, yep. So do you think that this will be able to translate user stories directly into a finished product?
Oh, I think Agile probably gets faster, right? Because you're still going to design a sprint to do things, right? Usually your sprint would be, what, 2 weeks long?
Yep.
Right?
Well, depends on the sprint.
Right,
settings,
average sprint, 2 weeks. But now my sprint can be 1 week, 3 days, 1 day, because you can just move so much faster. I don't need to wait 2 weeks for things to happen. Like if I can ship an app like pretty much end to end with like one plan or a handful of prompts while this talk is going on, then surely if I'm just working on sprints that focus on 1 or 2 features, I should be able to move at this speed. So why do I need 2 weeks? Like I don't, right? So.
Yeah.
Well, politics maybe.
Yeah. In my company we do 1 day, 3 day, and 1 week sprints. There's no more like 2 week sprints. You sit down, you do the Scrum board and all that stuff. We have an idea. We bring some like user data. We say, hey, we're gonna build this. Sometimes it's shipped in 3 hours. We come back together and say, are we gonna roll this out more broadly? So I think the principles of Agile are still the same, but again, a lot of the timelines are just compressed just because of how fast things can move. So we actually kind of have a little something. I don't know if you guys noticed while we were dealing with questions, but this is actually the app that is running locally right now. Yeah. We basically...
We have an error, so it'll fix the error.
Yeah. This is normal. We're going to now engage in principle number 4 called observability. Yeah. So again, if you don't know anything about code, you're like, what the hell is all of this, right? Copy and pasting the error code, like JSON, not valid JSON, blah, blah, I have no idea what that means. You just copy and paste it and putting it into the coding agent. Now, of course, as you get more experience, you should know what that means and use AI to learn, but this is actually the first start. I pressed this button, this error happened. Paste into agent, please fix.
Yeah, so I'm just monitoring what's happening on the command line if there's any error that pops up. But obviously you test with the UI, right? Like if I press the button to generate a comic, I don't see it, something is missing. So this is what we're doing here as well. We test, we observe, we report, and you work in that cycle till you get what you want. And here's our comic.
Yeah.
Right? So we literally, our entire prompt chain was one plan and one error. And the app now works. And we're like, I thought this will take more time, honestly.
I mean, we're supposed to have 2 hours.
Yeah. But anyway, so this is how quickly you can build apps that combine multiple features. We'll try to extend this, obviously, because this is not the entire app. But building an image generation thing that takes user input, creates a nice comic around it, and shows it to you was, again, like a 30-second thing with the AI tool itself. I think you had a question? Yeah. Give the mic to her. Shit, that looks pretty good.
It's not too bad.
Okay, hello, my name is Ais, and for context, I'm not an engineer, so when I wanna know when I vibe code, how do I know if I'm not giving excessive context? So here we make a website for like tech in Asia, right? And then like how do I know when to stop giving context? I can put there like tech in Asia is like a business conference held in Indonesia, blah 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 blah. But like I don't know if that is needed or not for the website.
Yeah. I have this thing called the Goldilocks rule. For those who know about the Goldilocks legend, it's or the story, it's you don't want to be too hot or too cold. You want to be just nice in the middle. That's the same thing with like using context when you're coding with AI. So too little context, right? Let's use the gift example. Like, you know, someone's gonna go buy a gift for me. They don't know what to get me. They buy me a box of chocolates. What if I'm allergic to it, right? But then I say, hey, I like to play tennis. You know, I want something that's, you know, less than $100. Okay, well maybe like a new set of tennis balls, right? Maybe tennis rackets too expensive. So all of a sudden that's enough context to give a pretty good answer. Now if you give too much context, then things don't go well either, right? And so just like humans, LLMs also can basically have information overload. Like if you ever like you know, talk to a partner or family member, you're like, hey, here's 20 things to get in the grocery store, and like you can't write a list or anything. They're probably gonna mess it up because it's just too much information, right? So same thing with LLMs, and I would say the attention span is quantified through tokens, right? So if you give too much information, consume too many tokens, then you're also gonna get output that isn't great. So these are the kind of things that are like an art where you sort of learn the, you know, within the Goldilocks spectrum, what's the right amount to provide. I always think, what's the minimally viable set of information you need to make sure something works, right? So in our case, we probably didn't, I mean, we probably could have maybe added in like a directory of all the booths and everything. Yeah. Maybe could have added like, hey, we're in Indonesia, so maybe we have some Bahasa jokes or something like that. Yeah. We could have done that. That would have made it kind of cool and fun, but we didn't do it in this particular iteration. Yeah,
but suffice to say, if you look in the bottom corner, you can see how much context we used to build the entire thing. We only used like 46,000 tokens. Now, the closer this gets to, you know, 200,000, which is the limit, you will see performance drop as well. Which again, like translates to how humans talk, right? That if you and I are having a conversation, and we've been talking to like each other for 1 hour now, and then I ask you to recall what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, you're not going to remember, right? Because we've just had so much else that has happened, and with every passing conversation we have, it's harder to remember what we first talked about when we just hung out. So that's why like you kind of want to manage context windows well. In this case, if I was going to build another feature, which we will, I'm not going to keep using the same chat again and again, because every feature can have its own context window and space to operate. And then once that's done, you kind of move on and like just start a new conversation. There are ways to make this worse for yourself. Like if you, like when you mention too much information, like everyone has a friend who's like allergic to everything. Right? And they keep telling you, I'm also allergic to shellfish and peanuts and this and that. And then suddenly there's like a list of 20 things they're allergic to. There's no way you're going to remember. right? And you will always mess it up. Like their food order is always messed up because there's no way to remember. But it would have been easier if they just tell you, I can only eat vegetarian food, or I can only eat, fish. I can't eat everything else. Like the framing makes it a bit easier for me to remember. It's the same here. That like if I try to negate everything, I don't want this, AI will still mess it up. But it's easy for me to be very clear and be like, I just want this and this only, then AI will do a better job. So that's how you kind of like play with context. Again, but some of this comes with time and experience as well. Like use GPT and try and see what happens, right? Like use Claude, use Gemini. When you play with just even the chat apps, you start seeing how this looks like. Like there was a paper that came out, I think in April of this year, where they discussed that if there were a lot of wrong answers in the chat, the performance of the AI would drop like off the cliff. Like the O3 model at that time was the best GPT model, and the performance went from like 90-something% to 60%, because there were too many wrong answers in the context. So you're just trying to correct it while it has all this wrong information that it also has at the same level. So it's not prioritizing information for you. That's where you come in, right? You get to decide what's in the context. So when it builds only the stuff based on the information you provided. But again, like play around with this. Try having like super long conversations. Try having conversations with 10-page PRDs. Try having something with just 2 features. And you will see like how it executes. Like even in this case, when it came up with the plan, let me see if the plan is somewhere. I think I could just read detailed plan, right? So the plan was very clear that it's going to set up the project, it's going to build the image upload interface, the API generation, comic generation, download button, make it look beautiful, right? Very clear plan. There's no confusion, right? And because we built the plan together, I get what I asked for. But if I don't do planning, then the context is all over the place. If I give it unnecessary information about the, things that are not related to the app, that'll create confusion. So I also have to do a better job at, navigating some of this, but there's nothing like super technical about it. Like, feels very intuitive, right? Like, so same logic here.
Should we build another feature?
Yeah, we can build another feature. Let's try to vibe code the database for this, I guess.
Yeah, so we're going to try to make it fun for us to potentially save and share images, because if you just do it for yourself, I mean, you can ha-ha, hee-hee to yourself, and maybe you want to share with friends. So what you need for that is a database. For those who are familiar with software engineering, that's called backend, right? So basically the things that you don't see on the front end, which is the site, you basically have something that saves the information in a set of tables.
So what I was thinking was that we have a gallery, right? So everyone's going to go after this, take some photos, make some comics. I would like to have a way for us to see what comics were generated so that other people can also see all the comics that people made, right? Okay. I think there's a separate mic. Anyway, so I kind of want to do that as well. So I'll plan with AI and figure this out. So say, I want to add a feature that implements a gallery for all the comics that are generated with this app. We can use Supabase to store and store the generated comics and fetch those in the gallery. We don't need any authentication. Just let the users generate the comics as per normal and automatically save these to Supabase plus the gallery page. Use Supabase MCP for more context on setting up the database, ask me questions before we build this. So again, we're going to sit and plan this because the first feature, if we planned it correctly, basically one-shotted the app. So we shouldn't change what's working. We're going to plan again and sort of go from there.
So, while this is running, I'll make 2 points, and I think there was a question in the audience. Who here has heard of Superbase or is familiar with Superbase? Okay. Okay, a few hands. Actually, a company that has a lot of folks in Singapore and was started out of this region. But basically, they are a much easier version to use than something like Firebase. Pretty easy to set up, free to use for I think up to 50K monthly active users, so if you have that problem, that is a great problem to have, but basically very easy way to spin up a database for free with a couple clicks. So that's what we're going to be using as our database. Second thing I wanted to point out is, if you notice the way that Agrim prompts, there's a technique he uses called ask me clarifying questions. Now for some people, you might be like, okay, I'm new to some of this, what kind of context do I need to provide, right? This is a great tool to use even if you're not building apps, to get the AI to ask you how to clarify your thinking. So let's say you're writing a LinkedIn post, right? Because you're like, hey, I'm at Tech in Asia, I want to summarize all my learnings, yada, yada, yada. If you ask AI to ask you clarifying questions, it might do things like, okay, who is your audience? Secondly, are there particular themes you want to highlight? Third, do you want to have a long form post? Do you want to have a shorter post with pictures? So that's one of the things that you can use no matter what you're doing with AI, but in the, in the context of using AI to code, this is super, super helpful. All right, I think there was a question. Yes? Is it working?
Test. Okay. Hello, I am Seno from TSN Asia. I am software engineer. Okay, the purpose of vibe coding is to build app faster, to test the market, or for a pitch deck, or anything else that need the app ready faster. But how about the scalability?
Scalability, right?
Yes, of course. For example, okay, the app is market fit, or the user is grow faster and bigger. And is it easy to scale? Is there any approach while we are doing vibe coding to make the app is more easier to rewrite or to scale? Thank you.
Okay. I think the question was basically, hey, we're using vibe coding right now to build all these prototypes, etc. Can it scale? How do you manage some of that? Currently there's actually quite a few, much larger companies than just pure startups that are using the same thing, right? Of course, how you manage your services, think about, things like security, protecting against DDoS, all that stuff. These are all principles that you should always keep in mind when building any software. I think building a vibe coding app is essentially no different, right? So there's, again, tons of apps already that are using this with thousands of users. I would say nothing around general best practices changes. You want to add to that?
Nope, pretty much.
Yeah. Same thing with security, by the way. People are like, well, how do you deal with security when you're vibe coding an app? You want to use the same principles, right? One of the questions people have is okay, how do I make sure things like API keys don't get leaked and nobody can go and delete my database and all of that stuff, right? You should still use practices like not putting your API keys in your code directly and putting it into something called environment files. Now the good thing is a lot of these coding platforms now recognize somebody who's new might make that mistake. So in platforms like Vercel or V0, which we're not using here, but it's another one that we quite like, it prevents you from doing that. You cannot actually add your keys directly into the code. It's in your environment files, right? So none of these first principles things change. It's just that you're wielding AI to do the coding. Is it still writing the code right now?
Yeah, so I just started setting up the database for us. Because I asked it to set up a Superbase database. It told me it's going to cost $0 monthly, so it went and set up the database for me. While this is going on, I can actually show you where that database is, because let me just open my projects. Also, this is like a new browser by ChatGPT, came out like today. I just downloaded it, so I'm trying it out. I'll use passkey. Okay. I'll just do it on Chrome, screw it. Superbase. Am I not signed in already? Yeah, dashboard. So you can see that there's this new project overheard at TIA that just got created as I asked it to set up a project for me.
So AI actually created that. We didn't touch the page.
It told me which keys I need to add. So I'm going to add these keys to my environment variables. Again, we're vibe coding this. Like ideally, you're not vibe coding your database. There's a bit more, thought behind what you're doing. But we're doing it just for shits and giggles, so might as well. Right? But anyway, so you could see that like us vibe coding this set up a database for us. There is, I don't know if we have a table. Yeah, we have a table. It's unrestricted because we want everyone to have access to the comics that are generated. But let's say if it was user-based, then there will be some restrictions here where you can see that data is publicly accessible as RLS is disabled. RLS means row-level security. So if Sherry posts comics, then I can't delete them. If I post stuff, she can't delete them. If there are more complex apps with, let's say, user profiles, then I shouldn't be able to see her profile. She shouldn't be able to see mine. We shouldn't be able to edit each other's profiles. If you have apps that have different level of access, you could also determine it by row-level security, as well as this other thing called role-based access. That, okay, as an admin, I have access to things, or as a, as a normal user, I don't. These are things you can configure. In this case, we don't need to, so it's unrestricted. It also set up storage for us, which is a public bucket, so all the comics that we generate will keep getting saved here. So let's see what it's doing. It's set up the entire gallery feature. Oh, okay. Okay, I guess it's done. Let's go
test it out.
Let's go try this out. I'm gonna get
Who here knows what a relational database is or have heard of it? Okay. Who here has used Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets? Okay, a lot more people. That is a relational database. It basically means you have a set of rows and columns, usually with something called a primary key. Like so, in like if you're using an example of Gojek, right? You have a writer ID or maybe user ID, driver or writer ID. You have a bunch of tables that connect to each other. So Excel is an example of a relational database. Superbase also operates that way as well because it's on Postgres. So that's how we're able to like save information that is in the app in a place that you can actually pull from, even if you exit out of the web app itself.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a gallery now. Let's try to generate this comic strip. It should do two things now. It should obviously still make the comic for us as it was previously, but now this should also save to the gallery, and it should be something that I can revisit constantly, because ideally if these images are saved to a database, then if I exit the app, come back to it, the data is still accessible, right? And then eventually when this app is live, you will be able to access the same comics we just generated because they should all be in the gallery. So, yeah, I mean, some text stuff here and there, but whatever, right? So let's see the gallery, and the images are not getting saved to the gallery, and I can see that there's an error here. So new row violates row level security, something that we just discussed.
So we're going to now debug.
Yeah.
So I press comic generate. It's supposed to appear in the gallery. It has not appeared in the gallery, but I see this error in my console, so go and fix it. Yeah, that's all it is.
So as you can tell, we were discussing earlier, row level security is the same issue here where I don't have permission to add things to the storage, so it's not saving the image for me. So it's going to go and vibe fix it for me. Ideally, if you're a dev, you know how much work and safety that goes into this, but we're vibe coding, so it is what it is. Let's try to create a different comic now and see if this one gets saved. We'll try with Premises. They don't know they're getting roasted here, so.
Sorry if you're from Premises.
Any questions in the meantime? Jeff, you were collecting questions?
I'm happy to answer questions.
No, I thought you were collecting questions to ask.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's a question.
Okay. We'll take some other questions then.
Okay.
Yes.
The lady in the back?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. My name is Ruth, and I'm a UI UX designer. So I was curious about this project right now, like what we are doing. I can see that we're generating a comic strip, right? But what about the consistency? Because I'm from a creative industry, right?
Yeah.
About the intellectual property and such like that. If we want to create something that is visually attractive, and if we want it to stay consistent with the same styling,
Yeah.
how can the AI do that? And if we have a certain branding in our company that the AI want to follow, if we insert that branding, is it going to be kept like as a privacy, or is going to be as it's used for its learning, and then some other people can access to our intellectual property for the visual? I want to ask about that.
So I mean, like there are ways to manage this, right? Like all of like GPT and stuff, they have enterprise plans for a reason, that like they don't want you exposing your data. So for example, in this case, I'm just using OpenAI straight up, right? So I'm using their public API, so my information can go to them. It's publicly available, but you use a private endpoint to avoid situations like these. So for instance, for my enterprise customer, when we use Gemini, we use it served from Google Cloud's Vertex, and it's a private endpoint, so it's end-to-end encrypted, so that information is not publicly available or accessible. But if you use a public API, then you can, well, assume that they are going to see what prompts are being sent, how that information is being saved, maybe use it to train, who's to say, right? But there are, basically my point is there is an enterprise alternative to use the same models or the same quality of models just through an enterprise channel.
But I think your question hits on a broader point, which is really interesting, because at the end of the day, if you have an app that you release to the world publicly, someone theoretically can still take your designs and try to use it, right? Even if it's not in the training set, they can do it. So where does that leave people who are creative, right? And I think at the end of the day, you being able to iterate fast on your own taste is your differentiator, because you're the one who's able, in your IP, in your head, to create more stuff, right? I think Agrim mentioned earlier that there was a guy who won the hackathon over the weekend using the gesture to draw app, right? And somebody copied it in like 2 hours, right? But the thing is, if you're the person who's coming up with the ideas and the design, you're always going to be ahead of whatever else someone's going to think of and do, and they're only going to be copying in the specific context that they see. So I completely understand as somebody who's creative, right? Like you put your heart and soul into a piece of work, right? And what's there to stop someone from ripping it from, screenshot, right? Is your ability to continue to, manifest your taste and design in all these different areas. And that is the piece that is hard to replicate, is you.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, there was a question in front.
I think there was a question here. Pink shirt. Yes.
Hello. So my name is Richie. I'm one of the skeptical programmers. I have two questions. First, can the AI do the unit testing, like creating unit testing automatically? The second is, can AI analyze the inefficiency in algorithm? Thank you.
Okay.
Unit testing and algorithms.
Okay.
Okay. Answer is yes on both fronts. Let's say if you're used to writing tests on your own, you can still write tests with AI, like standard. If you were doing like test-driven development, you can get AI to help you write tests, which is great because AI could also see what are the specific things that might need testing. So in fact, the test coverage might actually look better because it can look at the different steps within your application, right? But the second thing, the extension would be, okay, but if I want to test the AI itself, can I test the AI? And you could, and there's a full section within this space called just evals, where you have some level of ground truth, and then you test AI output against it to see what is the quality of output that's being generated. So you can test different models, you can test different prompts, and see, does your performance get closer to the ground truth or further away? That's how, at least in production, we end up determining which models you want to use, what kind of prompts are working better in comparison. As for algorithmic efficiencies, for sure. I mean, like, I personally use it to do, again, this requires some knowledge around what you're trying to optimize for, but you can prompt your way through this. That in computer science, you would usually look for either time efficiency or memory efficiency, right? So time efficiency is if I'm repeating my actions too many times and it's taking longer to run an algorithm, then it's inefficient, right? Or memory efficiency would be if I'm having to save too much information in temporary memory to action something, that's also inefficient. So if I'm able to prompt AI to be like, hey, I need this to be either more time efficient or memory efficient, you can get to a better answer because all these models, especially the cutting edge models, know all like standard algorithms that are out there, all standard data structures that are out there, right? That, okay, maybe I should be preferring a hash map or like a table over like an array because it's easier to access information because it's O of 1 instead of O of n where I have to look at every element. So these are kinds of things that you can use AI to work with you. My approach has been get something that works first. Like get something working, and then you can keep making it efficient by like tuning the algorithm, tuning the prompts, tuning the efficiency of like, you know, what filters you want to use. You want to use a Bloom filter or whatever, right? You can then get into the weeds of making it faster, cheaper, you know, more efficient. The aim of the vibe coding part of it is to get stuff that works as fast as possible. Like in the time that we've been yapping, we built a gallery. The gallery has a pop-up system. If I check the database and I refresh the storage, I should have an image that is stored within the comics. So while we were sitting around, we built a database integration that saves everything and a gallery, right? Like getting to an outcome is more important than how beautiful that outcome is sometimes. Like done is better than perfect. But once it's done, you can then start perfecting it, making it faster or whatever. Yes, sir. Yeah. Is there another mic around we can pass to Jeff? Yes. It's not on, I think.
Yeah, so as a principal software engineer, I know like skepticism when it comes to AI. I've been there, been through it, coached teams through it. So yes, it can generate unit tests, but it can also generate things like benchmark harnesses. This is where AI is really interesting when it comes to the generative aspects of it.
Yeah.
So you get something working once,
Yeah.
get it working once,
Yeah.
it's really good. Then you point the system to the thing and say, I think it's running a little bit too slow.
Yeah.
Can you benchmark it?
Yeah.
You know what? It would go through and do a generative approach and it'll look at the space and time of this thing and it'll try 4 or 5 different things and you go, look, pick the
Yeah.
best thing. Like
Yeah.
I often launch a coding assistant saying, I think this is a little bit slow.
Yeah.
Right? And I tell it explicitly to generate that harness.
Yeah.
And it will go off and generally try different things. It's
Yeah.
kind of dumb, but it brute force its way to something that's better.
Yeah, so like even like the simplest harnesses would just like be a time thing, right? So I'll sometimes get AI to write me a test that just tries different models within the family where I'm trying to test for accuracy and how long it took. Because sometimes you might make that trade-off that, okay, I need this to be super fast, but I'm not really caring for like 100% accuracy. 90% is good enough. But maybe in like the case that I'm building for, I can't be 99% accurate. I need to be 100% accurate. So if it requires me to spend 10 extra minutes to run that, I would rather take that over a faster model. So I'll benchmark it. So Actually, I had to do this recently for work where there was this really, I could probably show it to you as well somewhere, but like there was a really complicated file that I had to extract information from. It had 2,636 pins for like an electronic component. My problem was that I could not miss a single pin. So if I reported 2,635, the answer was wrong. But I was also extracting this information from 60 plus pages, and that's a lot of information for a model to digest one shot. So you start getting creative with approaches, like how do I handle this? But my number one benchmark was accuracy. Like no matter how long it takes, if it takes 30 minutes to extract, I don't care. Like I need it to be accurate. So for pages that were being particularly problematic, we ran benchmarks to see there's Gemini Flash versus Pro versus Claude Sonnet versus Claude Haiku 4.5. How do they work on time and accuracy? And then you pick and choose how you want to make it different. You try different prompts, same model, see what happens in time and output. So you get to play around with these benchmarks. The good thing was I did not write a single benchmark. I did not write a single test myself. Like all of that work was done with AI, where I was literally sitting in the same space, asking questions and figuring out which test to write or what to do, and letting AI do the work. This is where the co-pilot aspect comes in. Actually, yeah, I think I have the project open, so I can show you which data sheet I was extracting information from. So you have like these kind of like data like passages that I need to extract every single pin from. And this is like all these pages of information, but all of this comes from this diagram. Like I cannot get any of this wrong. But so that's why like all the benchmarking, the testing and all comes in, because how do I ensure accuracy? But thankfully, Claude wrote all the tests for me and then made sure that everything works. All right, so this is something that's different from status quo, where people don't think that this can be handled by the AI. This is probably the best use of AI right now in development, because writing code is probably the easier part in all of this, like making sure things are tight towards the end, especially when you go to production. That's where you probably need more help. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, you have a question? Yeah. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Gita. My background is in tech. I have two questions. The first one, how does this low-code tools help us with integration with surrounding systems? For example, we have another microservice running in.
Yeah.
How do we integrate a new feature in one microservice to another service?
Yeah.
If we put a lot of context, then that becomes a problem because there is limitation in there. The second question is, how do we use this low-code tool to do architecture design, for example, designing the load balancer in AWS, and actually help us with the deployment and traffic switching? Thank you.
Yeah. I think like you answered the question yourself as well. So like to do any of these things, you do the exact same thing, right? You explain, I want to build a load balancer that works with my AWS and figures this out for me. Ask me some questions on what the case studies are. Once it does, you can even take it a step further. You can give the agent access to your AWS if you really wanted to, right? Where it can then go and provision services based on what your requirements are. So for me, like when I had to set up my app on Azure, Azure is a horrible software to use. Like if you guys haven't used it, like you're not missing out. But problem is my enterprise customer wants everything to run on Azure. So I don't have a choice. So what I did was I gave command line access to Cursor's agent to my Azure, and then it was able to walk me through my decisions that, okay, given that all of these extractions take longer than 4 minutes, which is Azure's limit, how do I provision more time? The way to do it was to run background jobs with Redis. I didn't want to provision Redis on my own on Azure, so Cursor went and provisioned it for me and then made sure that I had access to these things. It checked where everything was in sync. Then we ran a test. It had access to the logs, so it could study the logs and tell me if something was missing. And then obviously I could also test and see whether things are working or not. And then extractions for files like these takes 20, 30 minutes, and they weren't timing out anymore. So that process of working with the AI sort of worked for us. It's the exact same processes with putting microservices in. Like, you're going to expose your microservice in some way to talk to other services, either as an API endpoint or whatever that might be. Work with the agent that you're using, be it Cursor, Claude Code, Codex, AMP, whatever it be, right? And then let it figure it out. And you'd be surprised how good these services are at figuring it out. Like, this was a smaller use case where we asked it to set up a database, then make sure the database talks to the rest of the application. But again, it took one prompt, right? It was able to figure it out autonomously, and which is where the large parts of the unlock are. That if I was doing this manually, I'm having to set up migrations. I'm going to have to push those migrations, make sure it's reflected, make sure everything is in sync. In this case, all I did was I just gave Cursor's agent access to my database and let it do things. Now, obviously, in a more production setting, I would approve the decisions. In this case, it was auto-approve because I just wanted to do stuff first. But the example and the thinking still holds, where these agents are more powerful than you think. And they're capable of a lot more than you think. You just need to try. Especially if it's code-related, models like Claude 4.5 Sonnet are exceptionally good at code-related stuff. But if you want to use a combination of models for models that run longer, so if you use GPT-5's Codex model, which is a coding model, it can run for 20, 30 minutes and then arrive at an answer. Actually, OpenAI employees themselves say that if they're out giving a talk, Codex is running at the back writing code, because they know that they can give longer-term tasks for AI to just figure out and implement and more or less get it right. So that's where now you have to start thinking about how much of this can I offload, which is just getting shit done, versus how much of it requires you to actually make a decision, which is architecture, design, what are you trying to achieve with your app, right? Why do you need a load balancer? What is the kind of load you're expecting, right? Do you need a load balancer based on what you have, right? Because very easy for us to hear other people and be like, oh, I need this because my friend has an app and he uses this. Maybe you don't need it, right? But the way to figure these things out are when you plan with AI. So you plan with AI, you can go through the pros and cons. Even within our pros and within our planning, it was asking me questions, right? But then it was also giving me suggestions that my assumptions, if you don't answer, are these assumptions, right? Maybe you can sit and question AI's assumptions, why are you assuming this? What's your thinking behind this, right? Get to some level of confidence with what the AI tells you based on what you want. Then let it just go to town, and it can go and execute and more or less get things right. The fact that we've had one error, two errors. One was how the information was being presented, and the second was in just saving. Everything else worked the first time. So this should probably jog some wheels on how good things are right now, and it'll probably get better going forward. So this is probably the worst it'll be. So something to think about.
It's really interesting, right? Because we've taught hundreds of people now, going from no coding background at all, teachers, doctors, nurses, fitness trainers, and been able to teach them how to do this, right? And one of the things that I mentioned is this is actually more of a mindset shift than anything, because we're so used to not being able to do these things that we ask a lot of these can you deploy from this? How do you do X, right? And what's really interesting is those are actually the easiest questions that AI can answer, right? So one thing that we notice when we teach our classes, people ask hey, how do you push this to GitHub? I will literally take word for word what they say, I type it into Cursor, and it does it for them, and they look at me it's I didn't do anything. Yeah. I literally, there's a practice. If you ask a question to somebody, you probably could actually type it into Cursor and go very, very far, probably even better than a human at it, right? But it's this mindset shift of that how do you can ask AI most of those and it could go really far. Yeah. I think the hardest question to answer are more of the why questions, right? What's the purpose behind why you're building something?
Yeah.
Why would a user want to use it, right? Those kind of taste questions are probably the hardest ones to answer. And if you're somebody who's close to why this problem is important, why you build a product around it, that's important. AI can solve a lot of the how can you type of mechanical questions.
Yeah. Like
So
even in this case, I did not need to know how to use the image generation model. I did not need to know how to use the OpenAI model, right? We did not look at the code this entire time, in all honesty, right? But me just knowing that I want an image generation model that you can get from this site was enough. The rest was AI figuring it out in terms of what key I might need, what's the best way to implement this within the app, how should we make sure this works effectively. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. So the execution part, which is something that most people are really married to, is something that you can start letting go a little bit, right? You can start thinking more about how you're going to do things, and which is why we stressed a bunch of times in the presentation, but even now, plan, right? Like the more time you spend planning and knowing the why behind it, like how it eventually happens, like will be a piece of cake. Yeah. You, Mike, or you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the weirdest things. As a software engineer, we spent our entire time, we got into software engineering because we're high control. We love controlling the computer, right? And so we're high control, and like we're very hyper specific about how we control the computer. And that's one of the mind shift changes you have to be as a software engineer. You have to like succeed control. You have to give away control. You have to be comfortable with the computer making decision. That's one of the steps in the way of thinking. And Sherry, to your point, it's the other side, if you're a non-engineer, is also thinking about like, it's kind of like there's been this bar that's stopped people from getting that. And they're scared to ask questions. You just got to ask questions. Now, having said all this, you still need to be an engineer. Like if you're a non-engineer and you're getting into this, you need an engineer friend, because you'll end up like it will do something wrong, security, etc. How do you deploy this? You still need to be an engineer, but literally just ask it questions and plan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing to emphasize, right, because I come from the, hey, I didn't know how to do this and now I know how to do this part, is it does not take away your need to be very diligent and think through the process, right? I don't go and deploy things without telling my team about it, right? I mean, I'm usually working with them with the understanding that like they are far more experienced than me in like certain questions like scalability, et cetera, that I need to work with them, right? But what this allows you to do is get started, because like there are so many great ideas that I'm sure people in this room have, right? But one of the greatest tragedies is not ever having see the light of day of those ideas just because you don't know how to build, right? So now what AI allows you to do is take that first step and put it out there, right? One of the most amazing things I saw from the hackathon over the weekend is that there are actually people who are going to be working on their ideas with their collaborators that they met as strangers on Discord or at the event, and they're gonna take it forward, right? Just because that person was just like, had that courage and boldness to be like, look, I'm learning this, I'm new, but I wanna express my desire to create this for the world, and that expressed desire and the attempt at it actually has brought people in to kind of bring it to life as well. So it is hard. I mean, I think one of the things that I try to remind anyone who's,
Useless.
Building this, doing this from the start is that you are going to have to debug and deal with errors, right? I mean, I think right now it's been a bit smoother just because, I mean, we're doing something a bit simpler, but you're gonna run into things, right? But you need to still step through and understand like how to go about solving that problem and have that persistence as well, right? I tell people like the first 10 hours that you try anything new like this, it will kind of suck. It's just how it is. I mean, it looks really smooth right now because we know what we're doing, but my first 10 hours, I didn't, right? I did things like not saving my API keys and being like, why is OpenAI not working? Or like, directing things in the wrong folder. I mean, these are mechanical things that again, can frustrate people, and it's hard to kind of get over that barrier initially, but the mechanical stuff can be learned, and after you cross that hurdle, I mean, you don't really do those things that much anymore, and then you kind of focus on freeing your mind up to do the more, the more interesting things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the link is public now. If you guys want to go use it in the conference, it's overheard-at-tia.versal.app.
Do you have a QR code or something?
I was trying to generate it, but it was asking me to make an account, which was useless. But I'll just put it up as a text box somewhere, and people can do something with that information.
Yeah, maybe make it big. So if you want to try this out, it's publicly available. Overheard-at-tia.versal.app.
And that'll be our conference contribution.
Yeah. So have fun. Give us suggestions if you do about, I don't know, the way it roasts or whatever.
Yeah. Any other final questions? We're kind of running slightly early, but I guess, like, you know.
Yes.
Hello, thank you for the presentation so far. So my name is Magdalene, and I'm a software engineer. And I do use AI a lot in my workflow. I use Cursor, sometimes GitHub Copilot. And I love it because it helps me to achieve a lot in such a short period of time. So my question is, how do we strike the balance between utilizing AI, helping in our work, versus being over-reliant on AI? Because sometimes I wonder if it's, I don't know, weakening my problem-solving skills or making me weaker in my CS fundamentals, because it's so easy to just go to AI directly when we have any problems. Yeah, thank you.
I'm not traditionally a software engineer, but I guess I can comment in that I observe like how people kind of shift their roles. It is becoming a little bit different where you kind of go from almost like a IC individual contributor to like an engineering manager, where you have now a bunch of agents that are basically your team running things, right? And as a manager, you still have to like supervise and step in and in places that are important, but it is a bit like letting go of control. I think that's what Jeff was pointing out earlier, right? And that's hard. I mean, if you spend 20 years coding and thinking engineering is a certain thing and all of a sudden it's this way, it is really different, right? But it does unlock things that are quite interesting. I'll just share like our experience actually over the weekend at our hackathon. Something that like I'd never seen before is out of the top 3 people that won out of 150, 2 of them were solo devs, actually. Like that generally doesn't happen. You normally see like teams of people, right? Because you need that sheer firepower. But you have people who are like, look, I have an idea, I can go and do things, and AI helps me achieve that at a much faster rate. But does that require you to kind of like shift your thinking? Absolutely, right? So you're not maybe, down in some of the specific syntax problems that you've spent time doing, but now you're thinking more broad picture around, okay, what services should I use? How do I architect this? Okay, who is the user and how do I design for them? And then, guide the AI just like Agrim does in the chat when needed, right? So it's for sure a shift. Maybe you have some thoughts as well.
I mean, you still can't delegate thinking. Like, I think that still has to come from you, right? Even for the app we built just now, I was very clear with what I want, right? That users should be able to do this. When they upload the image, it should be able to create captions and a 3-panel comic. Like, those are very clear instructions from me, right? This needs to be saved to a database where it's accessible. If you have access to a gallery, it should be able to, you should be able to click and like access the images or whatever, right? Okay, a lot of people have already started generating stuff, which I like.
There's like
right? The fact that like all of this is working live was stuff that I asked it to do, right? Like if you let the control part is very interesting, because what Jeff means is you should let AI do more than what you think it should be doing, but at the same time you still want to know what it's doing, right? Like you can't let AI just do things without your knowledge, because it's probably going to assume stuff, it's probably going to do wrong stuff. It might break your app. It might build things that are unnecessary. It might, right? The fact that like all of this is working live, it It might write code that's not necessary. It might leave more bugs than it initially started with. That's where you kind of want to be in control. To the gentleman's earlier question, that's why I would use AI to write tests, write benchmarks, but it's still me like who's asking for these things, you know, because I still realize that I need some kind of a test or a benchmark to make sure that things are on track. You want to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe if I speak in analogies here, instead of you being a software developer or software engineer, what if you were a woodworker, right? For the last 40 years, like software development, like a software developer has been paid to type at a typewriter, right? If I'm talking analogies here, well, if you're a woodworker, you've been using the handsaw, right? It shouldn't matter which tool you use. All of a sudden, we've now got the CNC machine or the power saw. You're still a woodworker, but now it's possible to do different things faster. You still need to think. Very good point. You still need to think. You still need to be in control.
Yeah.
Because it might chop your finger off. But you go up in the level of abstraction. We've been using essentially hand saws for software. Now we've got this mechanism for automating.
Yeah.
So it's really important. Like, I do find it myself learning a little bit less. It's really weird. This is why we see a lot of principal software engineers doing very well with these tools, because it amplifies what they already know. And a junior might not necessarily know that you should use push sticks with a table saw because you could lose your finger. A lot of the knowledge that we have as software engineers is forged from lots of innocent mistakes.
Yeah.
And I do find the amount of times, the opportunities for like spending 48 hours on some Heisen bug, that's all disappeared now.
Yeah.
And so some of those learning opportunities have disappeared. But you're still a woodworker, you're accountable for your outcomes. We just got a new tool in our tool belt.
Yeah, like I'll give an example, right? So as Jeff mentioned, it's helping amplify some of the stuff I know, which is why we can discuss, you know, time complexity and memory complexity, because you learn this in school when you do computer science. At the same time, for someone like Sherry, because she builds aggressively, she encounters some of these things while building. So, for instance, Sherry recently learned about what a race condition is, right? And the only reason she learned about a race condition was that there were multiple operations that were happening in her app at the same time, and they were hitting at different times. And it was hard to determine why that was happening. And as a result of building the app, she ended up learning what is a fundamental computer science concept you would learn in school. So it's not to say that the learning stops. I think the learning just happens in different ways and at different phases of the building process. Like Jeff and I can probably have some assumed knowledge that we can use to build, but you can still discover stuff because software construction is still software construction. Like that hasn't changed. The code is still the code, you know, like that hasn't changed. And therefore the principles that govern this also won't change, but they might just get a little bit abstracted away. So that's where your participation in the process is more important now than ever, that you can't be fully hands-off. Like I was only hands-off in the execution part, but I know what is being executed, right? But I was not hands-off at all in the planning part of it, in knowing what I want, the order of operations, all that stuff, right? So that's like, again, slightly different ways of thinking about it than like status quo before building with AI, but it starts making more sense the more you sort of go with it. Any final questions we have?
We can take
yes.
more.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the great presentations and thank you for the opportunity to ask. For the context of the question, I'm a non-technical founder, and in the meantime, I haven't have much idea about vibe coding. My question is, are vibe coding only suited to build simple applications or build prototypes, or is it actually possible to build a functional complex app with vibe coding like platforms or marketplace? How far have the technology advancements is, and what are the current limitations? Thank you.
So great question. Before Sherry answers, this app that I was showing you, 90% is coded with AI. You can literally see me asking AI because I was trying to code in the morning, where I was asking if I want to set up a particular feature based on what code I have, how should I rejig it to make it work for like this new feature I want to build. But I'm working with the AI to make that happen. I'm never going to write the code myself, but unless really needed to. But a lot of the work in figuring out what you want to build, you can do it at any stage, whether it's a vibe-coded like basic app. This is the app that I've been talking about that's in production, that is being used by like a company that did like $30 billion a year, right? So, but you can see that I have like documentation on things that I've done, that makes it easy for me to also keep track of what's going on. But all the work is still happening with the agent, and I'm still working with the AI to implement some of these things. So you can use these tools to build super basic apps, super complicated apps, everything in between. Obviously, the more complicated the apps get, the more you need to be in control of the plan and what you want to build, because it can spiral very quickly. And as like this has like so many lines of code and things that's going on, I kind of need to know where things are, but I can still use AI to do everything. I still ask AI to figure out which file is something in, which is what I asked. So it went and found which files things are happening in, and then figured out what would be an approach to use all of that together. So again, I'm still using the same agent we used to build the comic book app, right? Same UX, no other additional tools, but you can see the level of complexity across both apps. So that shows you the range of what's possible, which is why this talk is happening, right? So that like, if you have an engineering team, they should be using these tools. If you don't have an engineering team, you should still be using these tools, because then you can get a first version of your product out, right? Jeff, you want to add something last before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, so something, speaking with other like founders these days, with these dynamics, something that's changing is they're no longer thinking about 50 people engineering teams. They're now looking at like 8 people engineering teams. You still need engineers, and the engineers need to be using the tools. But what you're seeing is like a multiplier outcome where you can do more with less.
Yep.
So it's not necessarily like prove it to me if it works or not. Go try it. Go try it as a non-founder, and then go as a founder, and then go find yourself an engineer to actually critique it. Right? You may not know if something's good, but what I'm seeing is it produces software that's better than most offshoring gigs that I've seen in my life at 43 years old. Most offshoring gigs where you outsource the software development takes months and months to get an outcome. Now we're looking at like, you can get results like in days. There's something fundamentally different here. So if you're a founder, find yourself a good engineer, and then start thinking along the lines of only needing much smaller amount of engineers who are AI native.
Yeah, and this sort of wraps up our talk with what we talked about at the beginning, which was you don't need 2-week sprints, you don't need crazy big teams. You can build very quickly within the day, within 2 or 3 days. So it's very easy for you to test, see what your user thinks, rinse and repeat. So you can move incredibly fast for fractions of the price. Like I don't even know how much I spent, but couldn't be more than a couple of dollars to build everything. So from a cost, time, efficiency perspective, like now is probably the best time to be building, and it'll help you as a founder move faster, technical or non-technical. But if you're going to build a team, build an AI native team that can continue doing the same thing for you, so you can move and build faster. Yeah.
So I guess just to put a wrap on the talk, this is a very unprecedented time for all of us, right? I think both people who are engineers now kind of rethinking like what software engineering even means, and how your kind of role shifts, as well as if you're non-technical traditionally, like how do you leverage all of this? My best piece of advice is give yourself the permission to try, make some mistakes because you will, and just kind of embrace some of the like newness and even maybe loss of control that you might have been used to, right? Doing things a certain way. Because the upside is huge, right? I mean, if you think about it, if you're able to compress development times from 6 months to 6 days and take teams of 60 and make them 6, just think about how many more ideas and problems can be solved in the world, right? And this is really just the beginning. Like, this is the absolute worst the technology is gonna be. And we still were able to kind of build this app live. Nothing is being pre-recorded. We were able to do this in less than 2 hours. So you have an opportunity to really dive in and just let your curiosity guide where you go. Doesn't matter what background you come from. Doesn't matter, like how many, ways you're thinking, oh, you need to be technical or whatever to try things. Just give it a shot. Like, you can seriously just do things now. With that, I just want to thank everybody for coming to the talk, and enjoy the rest of the conference.